In an effort to just quickly document the process of putting a freewheel hub assembly on a 3rd gen 4runner that currently is set up to have ADD, or the automatic differential disconnect. There's some good information on the internet, but I didn't find any good information on doing one of these hub swaps with ABS. If you have ABS, you want to maintain the ABS. If you don't, you're going to have potential problems with your speedometer and your braking system. Those are important things to keep working in your truck. So I'm going to show you the parts that I used and how I sourced the parts, and what I used and kind of generally what I did to do it. Most of the time I'll do a replace with new parts all the way in and all the way out, just given the fact that my truck is 17 years old. It's had a number of people have done things to it over the years, and it just makes it consistent and reliable for me in the future if I need to get back in there and do things. Parts. So this can be a really expensive proposition if you do all new. You're going to notice a lot of my stuff is all new, partly because I live in Minnesota, which is part of the Salt Belt, and sourcing junkyard parts can be extremely frustrating in the Salt Belt. Most things that are 20 years old are completely eaten up, but I'm going to walk you through what I replaced. So I did get 2 new steering knuckles. This is the part for This is the part for the steering knuckle. These are specific to left and right. I've done the left already. This is the right. Just be aware that they are different. It does not come with the bolts for the brake caliper. This is the part number for the bolts on the brake caliper. It does not come with the bolts for the lower ball joint. This is the part for the bolts for the lower. You'll need 8 of these. Once again, you'll need 4 of these guys, 2 each side. You're also going to, the steering knuckle does come with the brand new upper ball joint for you installed, but of course it doesn't come with the castle nut. So you're also going to need a castle nut, and that is the part for that castle nut. You're also going to need 2 oil seals, one for the inside and one for the outside. This one, I believe, yes, is the inside of, the outside of the steering knuckle, inside of the hub. This is the oil seal, and these are not side specific. These should be exactly the same. This is the oil seal for the inside of the steering knuckle. You're also, I ended up replacing the dust shields. Mine were a little bit cut up and a little bit old. I also decided to replace the lower ball joint. That lower ball joint part number is that. It does come with a castle nut included in the package, so you don't need to buy the castle nut for that one. You're also going to need to source a 1st gen Tacoma hub, and the part numbers are not side specific, and this is the part number for that hub assembly. You're also going to need the Tacoma lock nut on this guy. Toyota says this is not reusable. You do have to dimple it. I decided not to reuse it and got a new one. They're only like $4. It's probably worth it, I think. And I'm going to show you the difference between these. This is really the only difference in the parts. This is a spacer, and this is your ABS tone ring. So if you look at the factory service manual, this is for the 4runner, and this comes out of the 2002 factory service manual. That's the only one that I have. You can see the parts in order, and it does show without and with. So they're 2 different versions of the 4runner. The steering knuckle is exactly the same part number. This is out of the 2000 service manual for a Tacoma. And you can see it shows the with freewheel and without freewheel. And although I've been told that the freewheel hub never came with the ABS sensor, they do show it, so I'm guessing that it really relates to the ABS or the ADD version of the Tacoma. And as you can see, the only real difference is between this tone ring and the spacer. And if you actually measure this spacer with a caliper, it's exactly 5 millimeters thick. The ABS tone ring, this interior portion right here is the only portion that makes contact, and that is exactly 5 millimeters. So it's a direct replacement. So these two parts can be swapped, as you would think, right, based on the parts diagram. So everything works out nicely. There's a ton of other parts for the freewheel hub assembly. There's studs that need to be replaced. There's nuts on the top of those. I did source both of my hubs and cleaned them up from a junkyard. They're a little beat up, but they seem completely functional and they operate smoothly, and I was cool with that. One thing that is helpful is if you do source from a junkyard, take a picture of the vehicle sticker off the inside of the driver's side. You could use this particular VIN and style code if you wanted to source the newer or replacement parts that you need to do it. So those are the parts. I'm sure I missed something. I'm not going to go, like I said, I'm not going to go through all the parts for this. There's a couple of different gaskets that need to be included, cone washers. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to happen there. So let me just go through, and then I do have actually a completed press in one. I need a friend to come over and help me torque this. This interior locking nut needs to be locked to 204 foot-pounds. And mounting the assembly inside of a wheel is definitely the way to go. I'm sure there's other ways to figure it out if you had a huge bench or something, but putting that kind of pressure with the weird special tool, it's also something that you will need to purchase, is this special tool. And this is the one that I purchased. It works okay. I was able to use my impact wrench to get the old Tacoma hub assemblies back out that I actually sourced from a junkyard. I'm not going to be using them right this second. I'm getting them soda blasted and I'm going to clean them up and put new parts on them. But this is a huge pain in the butt. There's no other way around it. Get used to a little pain and lean right into that guy. A couple of the parts that I missed that are pretty important, pretty critical. It was sitting here, but there's a circlip that goes on the inside of the steering knuckle to hold the bearing that you're going to press in. You're going to need 2 of those, and this is the part number for that one. You're also going to need some new bearings. You definitely can't reuse the bearings unless you're some kind of press god or something. I just can't see how you would get them out based on taking some of these things apart. They usually fall apart. I have about a 50-50 chance of completely destroying the bearing and having to cut off the race, which is a huge pain, but it is what it is. You can source these from a number of different places. That's the OEM part. I went with OEM parts. They were no more expensive or cheaper than any others, so that's what I decided to do. All right, on with the pressing. So this is the setup that I think I found to be probably the best. Worked out the best so far was steering knuckle, a couple of press plates underneath just to get it up to clear the lower ball joint mounting points. Painted this guy up with some grease and the inside of the steering knuckle. And then this is an old bearing race off of one of the old Tacoma knuckles, which obviously fits perfectly around the outside of the new bearing. And then there's just came with the press kit that I have. It's like a whatever, the top to the press sleeves actually fits nicely inside. Also helps you get it nice and centered. Hopefully you can get it nice and flat. You definitely don't want to put these things, you don't want to put 20 tons of pressure on stuff. Usually things go together pretty nice when they're brand new. So you can see my Harbor Freight press is really not very straight. It's a really cheap piece of junk, but it works and it does what it needs to do. If I was a professional shop, I definitely would not be owning a Harbor Freight press. As you start to get it in, it definitely starts to load up. I've had these things kind of come apart on me. Kind of like that. So lots of fun. Should hit resistance right about there, and that's the bottom. It's up against the wall inside the steering knuckle. We're done. Excuse you. And we're pressed in, and here's the groove for the circlip. Here's the install on that circlip. I usually just use a little paintbrush like this and kind of loop stuff up. Makes it a little bit easier. These are actually pretty easy to put in. You can just work them with your hand. Really easy. Yeah, really easy. There you go. And then usually that last part, once you get it in, you can just kind of pop it in with a screwdriver. Try not to bend it too bad. There we go. Make sure you leave a piece of the blue glove in there. All right, and your circlip is in. Looks good. With the piece of blue glove in there, that's going to be stuck there for permanently. All right, now for pressing the hub in. I got a little ahead of myself. You just make sure you don't forget to do this. It's pretty critical. I don't know, you can't really mess these up. They really only go on one way. This is the right, you can see the two where the brake caliper will clear this. If you put it on backwards, and you could put it on backwards, that'd be unfortunate, I think. The holes will of course still line up, but you won't be able to put your caliper on. So make sure you put that on the right way. I think the torque spec on these is like some weird, like 13 or something like that. So there's 4 bolts that go in here, and I'm going to put those on. I'll torque them down. I just want to make sure I got the entire process step by step. And then I'll come back, and then we'll put there's a dust shield kind of that goes on the outside of here. It's not really a seal, I think. It's definitely, on older ones I've seen, they're really beat up. It doesn't keep water out, so they get rusty, and sometimes they can be tough to get off, but we'll put that on next. So the next step is to put that dust shield on. Once again, I just kind of painted it up. I'm actually going to paint that just a little bit on the inside. Make sure we get some lube in there. These are kind of a pain. They're really kind of hard to get straight started. I don't know. There's probably an easy way to do it. I'm sure I choose the hard way to do everything the first time at least, maybe second or even third time. And I need a hammer. I like to leave my tools kind of laying around, so it's kind of a treasure hunt every time I do something. I do have a piece that's about the same size, so I'm just going to try and use that. We're really crooked. Absolutely beautiful. Awesomeness. All right, we're fully down on that little rim. We're looking good. All right, done. And make sure you hide your hammer again so it's another treasure hunt. So I wanted to show you how I set this one up. Because of the pressing of the hub into the knuckle, the bearing is a little bit different. You need something that matches the inner race diameter, but still will go into the hub. Not this one, this one. So this guy is just big enough to go around the outside and fit nicely onto that inner race. So when we do this, I'm going to set this up. This one's going to be stacked on the bottom. This guy's going to be, the hub's going to be pressed in, and just as long as you have something that's going to miss the brass bushing that's holding this stuff in. So that's, once I come back, I just want to explain kind of how I'm going to set it up. Then I'll show you how I pressed it in. So hopefully you can see how that's working there. That inner race on the bottom off the red plates is being supported, and then we're going to press that hub into there. This way you minimize the chances of wrecking that bearing when putting it in. If you don't support that, I'm sure these bearings are pretty tough. I mean, they take that 200-pound bearing preload, but just, you know, it'd be kind of dumb, I think, to not put some kind of support on that inner race. I'm not an expert on pressing bearings. I've done quite a bit on ATVs, and this is how it's done on like Honda ATVs. So I'm just going to use the same methodology. Just have to be careful that that bottom support, you don't hit the inside of your hub and like strip out those threads on the back. Just need to be kind of careful when you set the whole thing up. But it should go in there pretty easy. You can see it's dropping down pretty easy. And there should be a little bit of resistance at some point. I hit the bottom of my press. I got to put something in there to give me a little bit of height. Oh, bummer. I don't need too much. I gotta move you. Hopefully this will be enough. Hang on to this. As if pressing bearings wasn't exciting. I know. It makes it a lot more exciting when you have to reset during the middle of it. Should be enough to get the rest of the way down. And there we hit. I think our resistance. Yep. So Okay, so we're fully pressed in there. These are pretty stiff when they're first in, which is probably a good deal. I'm gonna flip them over. This is the ABS sensor. So if you didn't have ABS, you'd be putting the spacer in, which would be next. But in this case, we're putting the ABS sensor ring in. I'm just gonna lube this guy up. Just a little bit, not too much, not overly crazy, but it makes it a lot easier to get some of these things together. The depression goes up, just slips right into there like the spacer would, and then the crazy pain in the butt locking nut goes a lot easier with the really pain in the butt tool. So we just got to put the final torque on. Let me see if I can get a shot inside here. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. I'll try. But the ABS sensor ring is right in the middle of where the tone ring is right in the middle of where the sensor gets connected up to the steering knuckle. So I'm hoping that works just fine.